progress does mean is that where it's safe to do so, we can gradually and carefully restart some of our activities. For many small business owners and their workers, being able to reopen is welcome news. Of course, this is not without its challenges. People need help getting back on their feet. That's why we brought in new, targeted support to get businesses going again. Use the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy to rehire your workers. Access a loan through the Canada Emergency Business Account to adapt to new realities, and contact your regional development agency where we've boosted funding if you don't qualify for other supports. Thousands of business owners have already navigated the process and are getting the help they need. And if you're not one of them yet, we're making it simpler to find out what's available. Go to the COVID-19 page at canada.ca. You'll find a section that lays out all the programs based on what your need is, from rehiring staff to accessing credit. Your business matters to your employees and to our country. In fact, it matters to our whole economy. So, a concern for you is a concern for us, too. And that brings me to the question of your rent. Paying rent on your space might be a problem right now. We hear that, so we're taking action. We're creating the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program. This benefit will provide forgivable loans to landlords so that they can reduce by 75% the rent for small business tenants that have lost the majority of their revenue because of COVID-19. If you're a landlord and you and your tenant are eligible, please apply. Go to cmhc.ca to get the details on what information you'll need when the application portal opens starting May 25th. Once this launches, you'll receive your relief quickly. Our government, along with the provinces and territories, will cover 50% of the rent. We're asking that landlords absorb 25% and tenants pay the rest with the support of programs like the CEBA. For larger retailers, we're also working on a new support, and we'll have more details to share soon. These are challenging times, but together we can protect jobs and make sure that our economy bounces back, and that will be good for everyone.
We are in the process of introducing the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program. As part of this program, landlords will be able to receive a forgivable loan to reduce by 75% the rent paid by small business tenants, and if they've lost the majority of their revenues. Go to the site of the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation to see what you need to apply to the program once the portal launches on May 25th. You will receive the support you need soon afterwards. Our government, along with the provinces and territories, will be covering 50% of the rent. We are asking landlords to cover 25%, and tenants will have to pay the rest through programs such as the Emergency Business Account. For larger retailers, we are in the process of developing new support measures, and we'll have additional details on that very soon. Together, we can protect jobs and take action to ensure that our economy makes a strong recovery. And that is good for everyone.
Whether you work at the restaurant around the corner or at an office downtown, your job is how you support yourself and your family. And no matter what you do, no matter how many other people your workplace employs, we need to protect that. In addition to our support for small businesses, we've also brought in help for companies of every size. Last week, we launched the Large Employer Emergency Financing Facility to provide bridge loans for the country's largest employers. As of today, applications for this financing are open. These loans will be delivered through the Canada Development Investment Corporation in cooperation with Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada and the Department of Finance. Our priority is that this program be fair and effective. Loans will be designed with a clear goal: protecting jobs and helping our economy rebound. Businesses can go online to cdev.gc.ca for more information on the application process. But I want to be clear. We are not offering companies a bailout. We are making loans available so that they can weather this storm and continue to employ millions of hard-working Canadians.
Starting today, businesses can apply to receive funding through the Large Employer Emergency Financing Facility. For more information on the application process, businesses are invited to go online and consult the cdev.gc.ca website. These loans will be granted through the Investment Development Corporation of Canada in cooperation with Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada and the Department of Finance. Our priority will be to ensure that the program is fair and effective. So we have set ourselves a very specific goal: protecting jobs and helping the economy to rebound quickly. But I want to be clear, this is not a blank check for businesses. We are granting loans so that they can get through the crisis and continue to employ millions of Canadians right across the country.
No matter who you are or where you live, we're here to support you. So I want to end this morning by reminding parents that when you receive your Canada Child Benefit payment today, it will include an extra $300 per child. This is money to help you through this very tough time.
Wherever you are or wherever you live, we are there for you. I just want to close this morning by reminding parents that when you receive your Canada Child Benefit today, you will be receiving $300 more per child. This is money to help your family get through this difficult period. And I'd just like to say a few words to parents. It's not easy raising children these days, but you're all doing a great job. Despite all the challenges out there and the problems we are facing together as a society, our parents are doing a wonderful job every single day. So continue your great work, and we will be there to support you. Together, we will get through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll now go to the phone for questions. One question, one follow-up. Operator.
Thank you. Merci. Star 1 for questions. Étoile 1 pour des questions. Première question, l'inaudible, la presse canadienne. À vous.
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau.
Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. Monday, we should be seeing the House reopen. I'm not sure that's what you want. That's what the Conservatives want. And you seem to have lost your last ally, the NDP. Now, the Bloc Québécois is also asking for specific things. Will you give them this so that Parliament can return normally? And what I'm talking about are changes to certain programs and help for small businesses. I'd just like to correct you, Lena. We definitely want to continue to defend our democratic institutions and to ensure that our Parliament is working. That's very important, not in spite of this crisis, but because of this crisis. We need to have a Parliament that works. And for a number of weeks now, we have been getting together 3 times a week, twice virtually and once in person, to allow members of Parliament from right across the country to ask their questions, to make a contribution. And since the beginning of this crisis, those contributions from all the different parties have helped us to shape support correctly to help millions and millions of Canadians. So, yes, we definitely want the work of Parliament to continue in the House of Commons. And right now, there are discussions happening between the parties as to what the best way to do that would be, given COVID-19. And those conversations are continuing. But I can point out to you that all parties, including the Liberal Party, want us to have an opportunity to ensure that Parliament is working properly.
I think, laisse-moi dire en anglais, Lina, juste une seconde. I think the important thing that we have seen over these past weeks is that our Parliament continues to function. We've been meeting 3 times a week, twice virtually, once in person, to ensure that MPs from right across the country continue to be able to share the concerns of their constituents, ask questions of the government and its programs, and also highlight solutions that will help Canadians as we move forward. And from the beginning, we've had tremendous input from all parties that has helped us make sure we're getting it right to help millions of Canadians right across the country in this moment of crisis. We want to make sure that we are functioning as an effective Parliament during this time, not in spite of the crisis, but because of the crisis. And that's why we're working right now with other parties in the House to try and figure out what the best way for us to move forward, to continue our democratic processes, to continue to have a strong functioning Parliament and democracy, while at the same time ensuring that we're keeping everyone safe.
Follow up? Lena, follow up?
Okay.
Pour les petites entreprises, êtes-vous prêt à bouger
No,
là
for small businesses.
Pardon,
Are you
Lena, je pense
prepared
que vous aviez
to do
été
more?
coupée au
I'm
début.
sorry,
Pouvez-vous
you were
répéter
cut off
votre
at the
question?
beginning, Lena. Could you repeat your question? Sorry. Yeah, it's not working so well today. So, I was saying, the Bloc Québécois is asking for specific things, that you make changes to the emergency response benefit and more help for small businesses. Now, you said you would be doing something, but it hasn't happened. So, will you accede to the request being made by the Bloc Québécois? Well, we are continuing to show a lot of flexibility about the emergency benefit. We know we need to help more Canadians, and that's what we're doing by working with the other parties and with Canadians. With respect to fixed costs, the biggest one is businesses' rent. And the announcement we're making today regarding the commercial rent assistance program for small businesses will help a great many of them out there. But we're continuing our discussions with all the political parties to have a functioning Parliament.
Prochaine question, operator.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Jamie Tashagumscom, APTN. Line open.
Hi. Good morning, Mr. Prime Minister. Sorry, having a problem with my phone here. So, with provinces and economies opening up, First Nations communities are remaining closed. Now, do you support these extra measures, even though they create tensions with nearby jurisdictions?
From the very beginning, our focus has been on keeping Canadians safe, with particular emphasis on people who are more vulnerable. And we've seen that because of challenges around health delivery, existing challenges and inequalities, Indigenous communities across the country are at a greater vulnerability to COVID-19 than others. That's why we put in place measures early on to help these communities protect themselves and be supported in this pandemic time. We know that as the economies start to reopen, as activity picks up across the country, we're going to have to make, and local jurisdictions will have to make very careful decisions about how and where to reopen. And we need to make sure that every step of the way, people are working with all local stakeholders, including and specifically Indigenous communities and leadership, to ensure that we're not bringing in greater risks. As much as we want the economy to reopen and things to get back to normal, we need to put the safety and security of all Canadians at the forefront of everything we do.
And a follow-up, Jamie?
Thank you. And as a follow-up, just on a different note, this pertains more to federal than provincial prisons. But in terms of early release programs, getting inmates with a history of respiratory illnesses out of jail, now with the relaxing of restrictions, is that not a priority anymore? And I was wondering, will Minister Blair be at the committee update today, or when will he be there?
We've continued to look very closely at how we can ensure that federal institutions like our correctional facilities are kept safe. We're looking at various measures and have brought in a number of measures to keep both inmates and staff at those facilities safe. We continue to adjust as time goes on, and as things become more necessary or less necessary, we will stay active on it on a daily basis.
Thank you. Next question, operator.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Christy Kirkup, the Globe and Mail. Line open.
Good morning, Prime Minister. You've addressed the issue of increased economic activity today. Spain has made the mandatory wearing of masks, except for children. Is the mandatory wearing of masks being considered by Canada's Committee of Chief Public Health Officers from across the country?
I know public health authorities are continually looking at the research and looking at the best way for Canadians to protect themselves. I believe they will have further recommendations on masks in the coming hours. The reality is the best thing for people to do is to remain socially distanced, to keep 2 meters apart, to stay at home wherever possible, and to wash your hands regularly and frequently. But in situations where you cannot physically distance to 2 meters, people are encouraged to wear masks, and I will allow public health authorities to make that announcement a little later today. I
believe that we all know that the best way to protect ourselves is to keep 2 meters distance from others and to remain at home as much as possible. But in situations where we cannot do that and we cannot keep our 2 meters distance from others, it can be helpful to wear a mask. The Public Health Agency of Canada will be making an announcement in the coming hours on this matter.
Just a follow-up. Thank you. Just as a follow-up, Prime Minister, you have been seen wearing a mask, including in your office, for example. Can you just paint a picture for Canadians about your personal approach to mask wearing? When are you wearing a mask? How are you wearing a mask?
Obviously, everyone's situation will be different, and we always need to pay attention to public health authorities. When it is possible for me to keep 2 meters distance from people, that is what I prefer to do. In situations where I'm either walking through the halls of Parliament or going to my office and coming in proximity to people, I've chosen to start wearing a mask. I will be wearing a mask as I go into Parliament this afternoon for our in-person sitting. Once I am at my desk in Parliament and 2 meters separate from everyone else, I will take off my mask so I can engage in parliamentary discourse. But as soon as I leave my seat and walk past people and walk through potentially busier hallways, I will be wearing a mask. That's my personal choice. That is aligned, I think, with what public health is recommending. I think we all need to adjust to what works in our circumstances and keep safety at the forefront of what we're doing. I
think every person will make his or her own decision about their behavior while at the same time following public health advice, we hope. But in my case, when I move through parliamentary buildings, and I will be going to Parliament later for the in-person session, when I'm walking down the hallways or when I go into the House of Commons, I will be wearing a mask. When I get to my seat, because there will be 2 meters distance between me and my colleagues, I will take it off in order to take part in question period, and upon leaving, I will put it back on again. I do that when I'm moving around because it's not always that easy to keep 2 meters distance from others, and in such cases, I want to wear a mask. But I'm inviting Canadians to reflect on how they can protect themselves and protect others while following public health advice.
Operator.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Marie Vastel, Le Devoir. À vous.
Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. I'd like to come back to parliamentary work. It's been 6 weeks now, more than 6 weeks, that Parliament has been suspended. But we're also talking about 6 weeks of virtual sessions. Now, the Bloc is talking about coming back sooner in order to make up for lost time. Now, do you think it's absolutely necessary to make up for the lost time? Well, I think those are things we're all thinking about and that we'll be discussing with the other parties. Of course, we had an election platform on which we were elected, and we would like to deliver on that platform. At the same time, we know that COVID-19 has resulted in profound changes in the way the country is working in 2020, so there will be adjustments made. And when it comes to Parliament, whether it's for next month or the months to come, we are now in discussion with the other parties, and I think it's important that we continue to sit. For a number of weeks now, we've been sitting 3 times a week, virtually and in person, and that's been extremely important, and we need to continue to allow members of Parliament to do their job. Follow up? I'd like to ask for a clarification. I understand that there are discussions underway, but you personally, do you believe that the lost time has to be recovered this summer? Or do you think it still won't be time to do that because of the crisis? What are your personal views as to the next possible scenario? Well, that will really depend on our discussions with the other parties and how well we can move forward with important pieces of legislation in the coming months, which bills will need to be introduced in the coming months and so forth. I would like to be more clear, but the fact is that the situation changes from week to week, and it is possible that we will have to meet more frequently as a Parliament so that we can do what needs to be done and ensure that all Canadians are safe and healthy. Louis Blouin, Radio-Canada, with respect to the House of Commons. Now, there is one request that's being made, and that is regarding the need for an economic update. The Bloc is asking for that to happen in June. Are you prepared to negotiate on that? And in terms of a hybrid parliament, now, there are some people sitting virtually and others in person. What do you think about that? Well, I think it's an interesting idea, and we've seen that happen in the United Kingdom, and the House of Commons has said that they could explore that option. And I think it would be a good way of allowing Parliament to sit both in person and also allow others in the regions to participate virtually so that their constituents are being represented in the House of Commons. So it's an interesting idea, and the discussions are continuing. With respect to an economic update, we have always been transparent about our investments and about what we're doing now. Certainly, things change every single week in terms of our economy, and we will certainly want to share our plans for the economy in the coming months. But, of course, we are working every single day to have a clearer idea of what could happen.
I think there's a lot of interest in a hybrid parliament model where some people will be there in person, where others will call in via video conferencing screens. I think there are ways of making it work and ensuring that MPs from every corner of the country get to participate and make sure their citizens are reflected in the debates that go on in Parliament, and not just those who live near the National Capital Region. Obviously, these are discussions that continue, but there are models that are effective out there that we should look at adapting for Canadian use. And in regards to where our economy is going, our government has been open and transparent about all the various measures we're putting forward. It is still very difficult to predict where our economy might be 6 months from now or even 3 months from now, but we will continue to work on sharing with Canadians a picture of what the future could look like.
Now, on Twitter, President Trump is talking about an in-person G7 meeting. Would you be prepared to attend? Well, first of all, I think it's important to point out the importance of the G7 and the importance of meeting with other countries in order to fight this virus and talk about the economic recovery globally. So that's very important. We need to have a meeting, and we already had a virtual meeting a few weeks ago. And it's important that we have another one in one way or another in June. With respect to the proposal of an in-person meeting, we will be looking at what the Americans are proposing. We will look at what the conditions might be, what the health protocols would be. But this is an interesting idea, but I think we need a lot more details before we can make a decision.
I think it's extremely important that we continue to have leader-level summits. We had a G7 leaders virtual meeting a few weeks ago where we talked about this important situation we're in, and we're going to need to keep talking about not just how we get through this COVID-19 pandemic, but how we restore the global economy to its rightful activities. So yes, we need to keep meeting as leaders, whether that's virtual in person. We'll certainly take a look at what the U.S. is proposing as host of the G7 to see what kind of measures will be in place to keep people safe, what kind of recommendations the experts are giving in terms of how that might function. There are lots of discussions to come, but we look forward to having those discussions with the American hosts.
Hi, Prime Minister. Tom Parry, CBC. You're asking landlords to take part in this program that you're bringing in. We've heard reports, though, of some landlords who aren't taking part, refusing to take part. Doug Ford was very forceful on this yesterday. I'm wondering, are you having conversations with the premiers about putting more pressure on landlords to try to get them to take part in this program?
I think we all understand that this is a crisis that is hitting really hard on businesses right across the country. And we know that if our economy is to come back, we need a large number of those businesses to hold on and to make it through this pandemic. That's why we are providing commercial rent assistance to landlords and tenants, and we really hope that they will take up on it. We know that if many businesses aren't able to make ends meet and do go under at this point, it'll be a lot slower to pick up the economy, and that'll be bad for Canadians, but it'll also be bad for landlords. It'll also be bad for building owners who will see a slower regaining of economic activity, and indeed with many people discovering that we can work from home, that to a much greater degree, there may be a lot of vacancies in commercial buildings over the coming months and years. Who knows exactly what the post-pandemic world will look like exactly, and that's why making sure we're supporting the businesses we have now to be able to stay in their spaces as we slowly restore our economy is going to be important, and we certainly expect landlords to be part of this solution. We
know that it's very important to ensure that the economy can make a strong recovery. There are too many businesses, too many people out there who have lost their business because they don't have the necessary support to get through this crisis. And if that happens, the recovery will be much slower and harm the entire economy. And it could also really harm landlords who own buildings. So it is our hope that building owners, landlords will take advantage of these measures to help their tenants get through this crisis so that we can recover strongly as an economy. In a crisis like this, we have to be there for each other, and that's what I expect of landlords.
Police say they've made more than 2,000 home visits for people coming back into Canada, making sure that they're complying with the self-isolation rules. You were talking yesterday about bringing in more measures when non-essential travel is allowed. Other countries have brought in monitoring devices for people coming into the country. Is that something you'd look at, or do you want to look at other options first? Where do you stand on that?
I think we know that a key part of reopening and keeping our economy going and controlling future spreads of COVID-19 will involve being very, very careful that we're not importing new cases, even as our economies open up, even as border restrictions are potentially loosened down the road. We need to make sure that we have the measures in place to be able to ensure that new cases aren't arriving and spreading through the general population. We're in discussion with the provinces and territories to ensure that we do have the capacities to do that as we look towards economic reopening. Those conversations are ongoing.
Prime Minister Janet Silver, Global News. You spoke just a moment ago about rent relief for landlords. Why not give that relief directly to the tenants? Why not just bypass the landlords if they're reluctant to start using it?
We know that the solution involves bringing different communities and groups together. The landlords need to be a part of the solution on this. We need them to understand that they do have a deep vested interest in keeping their renters in those spaces, that if more businesses go under because of COVID-19, we're all going to be worse off. And that's why this approach, in concert with the provinces, is going to be the right approach to do it. And we implore and expect landlords and building owners to understand that we all are in this together and we need to be there for each other. And this program is there to help them and to help small businesses.
And as provinces reopen and parents are expected to go back to work, childcare is an issue. I know that is a provincial matter, but I'm just wondering what discussions you may be having with provinces in terms of childcare to help out those parents. And are you concerned about the lack of childcare in this country and what impact that may have in terms of reopening the economy?
As a party, we've long been concerned about the lack of childcare spaces across this country. We know it's a challenge in the best of times for families to find that balance between care for their kids and the jobs they need to support their families. That's why when we formed government in 2015, we moved forward with historic investments in childcare agreements with the provinces to increase the accessibility of childcare. In our last platform, getting re-elected, we made more commitments on childcare of working with the provinces to invest in programs that will help more parents, more families, and grow our economies and our communities. We need to continue to do that, particularly right now, and we will be there to work with the provinces as we reopen and respond to childcare needs.
Hi, Prime Minister. Molly Thomas, CTV National News. While your government has flexed its fiscal firepower, as you call it, no government has unlimited money. So big businesses can now apply to this LEAF program for loans, and your government will ultimately choose who gets that money. So how comfortable are you in this new economy choosing the winners and the losers?
I think it's important to highlight that with the new LEAF program, the government is there as a lender of last resort. Large businesses, unlike the small businesses that we've been very generous and direct to with the Canada Emergency Business Account, large businesses have much greater access to credit on the international credit markets through the big banks, and that's why we are encouraging them to make available the credit facilities that they have right now. If they're in a situation where they cannot access that credit, they can turn to the government for funds through the LEAF program, but they are loans that come with conditions around governance, around paying a proper share of taxes, around a plan for climate change. These are the kinds of things that we expect as Canadians when our taxpayer dollars go towards supporting businesses. So we are there as a program, but there are many conversations and discussions that are going to happen within companies as they look at the best way to weather this storm.
Prime Minister, switching gears a bit, the United Nations said today that Canada has an obligation to secure the urgent release and repatriation of a 5-year-old orphan girl who's in northeastern Syria, especially now with COVID posing an added threat. She has family here in Canada. What is your government going to do to get Amira out of that overcrowded refugee camp? We have been working on this file for many months now. We know that it is an extremely difficult situation for the family. We're making sure that we're going through the proper processes
challenges, but we also understand the importance of being that country that is consistently there to support people in difficulty around the world. We're trying to do our part, even in difficult situations, and I want to thank the extraordinary public servants who are working even through this pandemic to help. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
That is the Prime Minister of Canada on this Wednesday, giving his daily briefing on his government's response to COVID-19 and the pandemic, telling us that there will be some news on mask wearing in this country coming up at the noon briefing from public health officials here in Ottawa after more conversations with provincial health officials. So we'll stay tuned for that because that will be important information for people. Vashi Kapelis and David Cochran join me to help with our coverage there and dissect a few things that the Prime Minister said. Let's do the commercial rent program as we were talking about before, Vashi, and then David, I'll turn to you on another issue I know you want to get into. It doesn't sound, other than sort of encouraging landlords, like there is much that can be done to force people to do this, and there is a bit of risk for landlords involved here, and of course tenants are desperately hoping that they will take advantage of the program.
Yeah, it's entirely predicated basically on the landlord's willingness to participate, and by participating that means that the landlord has to take less money. So the federal government would help subsidize the rent and pay about 50% of it. The tenant would pay a quarter of it, and then the landlord would essentially have to eat the other quarter of it. And now that depends on a sliding scale, obviously, and the number of properties or units that the landlord has. They have to make that calculation, but some landlords have, for example, approached their tenant already and worked out a deferral system. So you have to calculate for yourself, is it better if I get the full rent a year from now or over the next year, or do I take a hit right now that might end up helping my tenant more? And so I think it depends not only on the tenant situation, but the landlord situation. And the Prime Minister got a few direct questions there about why not just